And I want to say something about our guest tonight. Selena Delesie, she comes to us from Canada, a bit west of Toronto, and she has a degree in mathematics and computer science. She's held quite a lot of positions in technology as software test, project and program management, agile coach, executive coaching, and today she does leadership and transformation coaching. And so you have a chance to use your applause button now in the reactions if you'd like to give her a warm welcome from Boston. Okay, and I'm going to now stop sharing and we'll take a moment while she begins to share her slides. Okay.
Thanks very much, Nancy.
All right, we'll bear with you, no problem.
Okay. You see the slides?
It looks good.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. I was so excited to come and join you all in the Boston area. And you know what's going on with that. So here I am in my office at home while you're all in your spaces at home. And hopefully this feels pretty good as we're going. This particular talk I've given a number of times, usually as a keynote. And the very first time I was invited to give a talk on, specifically, someone reached out to me and said, would you give a keynote to our audience on bringing more heart and something like that into agile environments, because we're experiencing a lot of struggle around that. And I said, sure, that sounds amazing and right up my alley. So I put that talk together on the heels of going to see the Dalai Lama talk in Belgium that year. And there were some incredible speakers there from all different industries, of all different backgrounds. And the core message was how to fuse power and care together in really helpful, supportive ways for positive change in the world. And it was just so inspiring. So this talk formed right after going to do that. Now I'm going to stand and move around here. If you're looking at my screen, that's what's going on, because I don't know how to give this talk when I'm sitting down. Okay. So evoking the soul of Agile. This talk for me is really about what I care most about in organizations, which is about people and how do we relate to other people. A lot of the work that I've done in my career, from being in an organization as an employee, was about how to foster the best in people. And I prioritized that over the projects, which actually worked out for the projects way better than the other way around. Then I moved on to consulting and coaching and training over the last 10 years, speaking quite a lot. I have a podcast that used to be called Lead with Love. Due to legal reasons, someone trademarked the name after I started my podcast, and then I had to change the name. So right now, the temporary name is Love, Light, and Leadership, because I haven't gone back to edit everything through yet. But I believe it's going to resurface as something on compassion and how that relates in the world. But it is out on iTunes, and there's some really great conversations that I've had with like Lisa Adkins and a number of really inspiring people in the Agile industry. So, and other industries actually too. And otherwise, I've done a lot of other things outside of the software industry. I've done a lot of study and training in areas of transformational work, really in deep, like psychological psychotherapy, and even learning with shamans in Peru. So I've gone really deep into a lot of other things around transformation in the world and trying to pull those things into supporting us to shift and change to build resiliency. So that's a lot of the foundation, which is a big stretch from my math to computer degrees in university. But they help me to build a really healthy foundation and help me to work with people really effectively. So normally in my talk, this is where I ask people to raise their hands and say, what about you? What is your background? What are you doing? I can't see everyone raise their hands, but maybe, Nancy, you can give me some feedback on people raising their hands through the screen, if that's possible. I would love to know how many people, and just give me a thumbs up. I can see your video.
You want me to tell you who does a thumbs up on
Yeah.
Yeah, just a general like number of people, like how many
Okay.
people in the audience are identified as leaders in their organization by title. So if you do, you can just click raise hands. Does that work?
Yeah, there's a thumbs up and a thumbs down. There's raise
Oh.
hands.
Thumbs up would be perfect then. Let's do that.
Okay, I see one. I see two.
This is a much slower feedback process than a live audience. But it's okay.
Yeah.
We've got lots of time.
I see 4, 5.
Okay, let's shift into how many people identify as developers on the teams. Just quick thumbs up on the.
Yeah, remember to put your hands down if you put it up for the last question.
Yeah. Thank you, David.
I see 4, 5. That looks like it.
Okay, how many identify as Scrum Masters or Agile coaches or coaches of other kinds?
Expecting to see a lot more.
It helps me get a feel as to what stories are more relevant to be sharing.
6, 7.
Okay. And if you identify in another way and I didn't ask you a question that relates to you, I apologize. I would ask you to yell it out normally, but we're just gonna go on.
They could type it in chat.
You can type it in chat. I can't see the chat. That would be okay.
I can.
Yeah, that helps a lot, David. Thank you.
Seeing dev manager, product owner / manager.
Mm-hmm.
There was a comment earlier about depends on your definition of leader.
Sure does.
Product owner manager, quite a few product owner managers. Coach, transformation advisor, Agile Sherpa, Scrum Master. I guess if people get lost in the office, they can help find their cube again.
Kind of like herding cats.
Agile coach and dev manager, same person.
Okay.
Scrum Master.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, so I have a confession. You may have noticed my slides look like they might be drawn. They are. I don't identify as someone who's artistic at all. Someone said to me after seeing this talk before that probably maybe I should. And I said, well, you know, compared to my mom and my brother, who are incredible artists, I just doodle. But it brings me joy. And I really believe in doing things that bring me joy in the nature of doing your work. I hit a point of hating putting together slides. I just hated it. And in order to make it enjoyable, I started drawing my slides using an app, which makes things more fun. And so my only message to you in this is what can you do to make things a little bit more joyful with your job? There's always a space to do that. So are you agile? Agile is such a big word now. You know, when I first started hearing the word back in 2003, And before that, I was hearing XP, and I said, ooh, that sounds interesting. But nobody wanted to do it when I was working at BlackBerry back then. You know, Agile now is such a heavy word, I feel. It's very mainstream, and it's also very much a product of industry at this point. That means that it's heavier as, and now is a process in a lot of organizations. So my experiences in coaching and consulting and training, I encounter people on the regular who are saying, well, we have to do it this way and we can't do it any other way because this is what we were told to do. And they actually have more process steps to follow than they did before they were agile, and they'll say agile in quotes. Which lends the question, are we really agile? What was the purpose of being agile to begin with? Can anyone resonate with that? Maybe just a thumbs up or something would be great. Sorry, you're on mute, Damon, if you're saying something.
Yeah, I see one. Two.
I see a few thumbs up. Yeah, and I know that in some organizations, which in my experience has been, and from my colleagues in the industry, things are really like in a healthy agile space. But it still seems to be not the norm. So things that I still hear, and these are things that I heard 20 years ago, and I'm still hearing them. You got to go faster. We don't have time to do ABC. We have to put on overtime, and overtime is not the exception, it's the norm for a lot of people. We can't afford to do this. We just got to get it shipped out. We need to reduce our costs or put more people on it. Are these familiar phrases for you in your organization or the organizations that you're working with? Yeah. I'm seeing a few go up. Which means that we're not really behaving in an agile fashion, right? So what's really missing here? Well, if you look up agile as a term in the dictionary, you'll see quick and well coordinated in movements, life, which means being very responsive, being active and lively, and marked by an ability to think very quickly, mentally acute or aware. So when we take agile as a term in context of our industry, quick and well coordinated in movements, able to shift quickly and adapt, thinking like a basketball player and basketball team. They want to be agile to be able to move about and respond to things that are going on in the basketball court. Same with any other sport if you happen to want to follow such examples. So looking at the core 4 areas for agile, we're looking at individuals and interactions. Which means we actually have to talk to one another, and we have to do that in ways that are effective. We also want to see the uniqueness of each individual in our interactions so that we are able to treat each other as humans with distinct gifts and traits and things that they contribute into the organization. We also focus on customer collaboration, which does not mean that the customer provides us with stuff up front and then we go back to them maybe 2 or 3 times in the span of a year project. It's not very agile. We want to be bouncing things back and forth, kind of like a ping pong ball, getting those feedback loops as short as possible so that we can really adapt and change and enhance and expand on our ideas as we go together. We're working on building working software, something that works, and then enhancing and building upon that as we go, which can be very tricky to do with very complex systems, of course. And then responding to change. So again, like the basketball court example, being able to be very agile in life and limber as we're moving around and not being stuck in our processes, not being stuck in the meetings, not being stuck on, we have to do it this way because this person higher up said it has to be done this way, or And I'm sorry to use an example here. Product owner said it has to be this way. Scrum Master has to have it this way. You know, having all of these rules and steps to follow means that we aren't able to respond to change very effectively. What this really comes down to is that we're not machines. We can't expect human beings to behave as though we are programming instructions into them and just getting something out that is repeatable every single time. That's not realistic. It's not meant to happen. Many of our organizations, and not all of them, but many organizations or parts of organizations are expecting people to be like machines and that they don't need time to be human. And where does that come from? This comes from the industrial era as it started a very long time ago, where we needed repeatable processes to happen as we were building things in, sorry, my brain just went mush, in factories, right? So we needed repeatable steps and sequences of things to happen. So we have trained ourselves as humans the last 150 to 200 years. We have trained ourselves in our education system even to have repeated steps and practices and behaviors from people, expecting that everyone is going to do everything exactly the same way. And we see exactly these same things happening in many organizations, and it's still expected from a lot of leadership people, which does not work because we are living organisms, because we are human, because we are mammals, because we have a whole lot of things going on inside of our bodies. We all have hearts, we all have emotions, we all have feelings, we all have experiences that we've had before that inform our current present moments about what we might possibly do next. We have an ability to interact with one another. We have an ability to empathize with one another or not. We have an ability to pause and be and maybe receive some inspiration in the pause. And we can't do that if we are not being respectful of that we are living organisms in our organizations. And this really comes down to that we all have souls. So if that language doesn't work for you, that's totally okay. I'm going to translate into the soul of Agile in an organization. What does that mean? I'm going to suggest that the soul is what enables growth and transformation. That is something that is needed as a guiding light. What is your guiding light to make choices for yourself personally, but also as a team, as a project, and as an organization that helps you to make choices that are helpful or not helpful, that lead towards your vision or not towards your vision? What is your benchmark that you make decisions based off of? It is the root of everything that we do. It is what ignites creativity and innovation. And you can't ignite creativity and innovation without tapping into this. And it is what leads to success on all levels. In 10 years of consulting and coaching training and a number of years of doing leadership work of different types in organizations before that, this is what it comes down to for successful teams, for successful organizations, and successful projects. I've never had an experience that says otherwise. So what is a guiding light for Agile? I'm going to suggest care. I could use the word compassion, and I could use the word love. I often use the word love when I'm talking with people. It's something that freaks a lot of people out in businesses when I say love. It also freaks out some of my Agile colleagues who are very good coaches and consultants and leaders in organizations, some of them. And I say, you know, I identify you as someone who really loves people, who really loves the teams that they're working with, and really loves to help people thrive. And one individual said, no, no, no. I am not someone who identifies love in that way. I'm like, okay, I will say then that you deeply, deeply care. And he was okay with that. So I'll use the word care so I don't ruffle anyone's feathers about love. But it also means compassion. This also means presence. This means that we care for ourselves and are able to take care of ourselves and stay healthy, to make healthy choices for ourselves. So, for example, if we're being pressed to do a lot of overtime on a regular basis, we know how to put a healthy boundary in place, to have a conversation with someone else, to take care of ourselves and say, I'm sorry, I can't do that this week. It's not possible. I have other commitments, my family, myself, like whatever it happens to be. It also means that we learn to take care for ourselves in the way of taking breaks throughout the workday, to have conversations, to have time to pause. It means that we care for our family, our colleagues, our stakeholders, any partners that we're working with. We care about our values. We care about learning. We care about having fun. We care about improving and not just going with the status quo. We care about how are you and I working together in a helpful way. We care about excellence in our customers and our suppliers. And when we care about all of those things in a meaningful way, we have healthier interactions, we have healthier outcomes, we're able to thrive. So this comes down to that we need to stop doing Agile as a process, as a series of steps. We need to start being. So we can be agile, we can be care, we can be the things that we value and actually espouse them and embody them in every moment. So I'm going to give you a model to work with to help you with that in a little bit more practical way. And I'm sure you've heard some of these things before, and that's okay. It doesn't hurt to have them be said again. This idea that I want to introduce is called interbeing. Interbeing is a state that was identified by a Zen Buddhist teacher named Thich Nhat Hanh. This talks about that in reality, there's an interdependence between us in our human relationships, so that we have to relate with one another and we recognize that we are all the same, that we all have an impact on one another, and that we are as a whole together. So for example, a piece of paper is in a state of interbeing with the cloud that provides the rain, that provides the sustenance for a tree to grow. And out of the tree, we get a piece of paper. The paper can't exist without the other parts. They all have to work together in order to produce the piece of paper. Now, the piece of paper itself will break down again and maybe become a part of a new tree at a different time. So the same with us as humans in our organizations, there is an interdependence. There's a state of interbeing between us. And in order to act on that in a healthy way, we want to enact this state of care. How do we do that? I saw someone speak from the Presencing Institute named Martin Kulungu Banda. I actually saw him at the conference that I saw the Dalai Lama at. And he had a really great workshop where he talked about this intersection between having an open mind, having an open heart, and having an open will. And this is where the magic happens. If we have an open mind, but we don't tap into our hearts, we don't tap into that we have the ability to make choices for ourselves, then we are just mind-centered. We don't get the benefits, the other pieces, and we don't get to tap into the magic. Similarly, if we're just in the space of being open-hearted and it's all about love and compassion all the time, but we don't tap into that we have power and agency for ourselves, or that we have a mind that can make choices and consider things, then we don't get to tap into the magic. So swaying too far in one direction takes us out of balance. So let's go into this. What does an open mind mean? It means that we want to embrace curiosity in a nutshell. That we are curious about the state of things. We are curious about why things are happening. We might be curious about why someone on the team is behaving a certain way. Why are they doing something but not doing something else? The point of this is to reduce ignorance and to reduce doubts, to reduce confusion. We want to arrive at a state of clarity that is taking in as much information as we can. And not being in a space of we know what the answer is, but I wonder what I don't know. I wonder what I don't know about what the customer wants about this. I wonder what I don't know about what stressors my product owner is under. As a Scrum Master, I might ask, I wonder what I don't know that the team is worried about. As a team member, I might wonder what an executive sponsor is worried about. What is keeping them up at night about this project? I want to go into a state of curiosity and ask questions of people. For those of you who are coaches, I'm sure that you're very well experienced in being curious. That is the nature of being a coach, and especially around transformation work. We ask a lot of questions and have a lot of conversations to try to identify what we don't know, and always assuming that we don't know a whole lot. And there's always more to unearth. So an example of that is self-organizing, which is just like what we learned with Agile, right? Right off the bat, we're self-organizing teams. How many teams are really self-organizing though? How many teams actually have a list of processes that they must follow? How many teams have been told these are all of the stories that you must get done by this sprint or by this quarter? No ifs, ands, or buts, they all have to be done. I worked with a number of teams where, well, I've gone in to teach them classes, and I can't tell you how many people have told me, what do you mean we're not supposed to just do what the product owners told us to do at the start of the project 3 months ago? What do you mean that these stories are negotiable? They are, they just didn't know that they are. So what does this mean really? It means that instead of having power over each other, where a Scrum Master or a leader or manager has power over the team, we want to have power with each other. So this means that we are going hand in hand with each other to try to achieve the outcome, the vision that we have collaborated with our customer on, and that the team themselves actually gets to figure out how are we going to swarm together to do this. The most complex systems in the universe are naturally operating this way. We are part of the universe. We as humans are complex. Relationships are complex. Why are we fighting the nature of self-organization? If you look at birds flying together, like a large number of birds flying together and swooping through the air in different directions, it's called a murmur. And I'm pretty happy to see a murmur of birds swooping and flying around dusk many evenings in the area that I live in. And it's pretty spectacular to watch. You don't know how it is that they seem to be dancing through the air together in different directions, but they all respond to each other's cues. And nobody, like none of the birds hit each other, and they don't hit anything else. They just swoop and fly and dance in the sky together. And it's a really beautiful thing to see if you haven't seen that. And that is the sort of thing that I want to see happen in teams and organizations, that they're able to kind of swoop and move together. And it's not one leader driving that murmur of birds. They all are able to lead the dance of the murmur, just as we want to see happen in the Agile teams. So from the space of an open mind, the question you're asking is, I wonder I wonder what is happening for this person right now. I wonder what my executive sponsor is worried about right now. I wonder how we might be able to be more effective as a team on this particular iteration. I wonder what would happen if we allowed ourselves to take half a day each iteration to learn something. I wonder how that might benefit us. Like, there's so many states of wondering that you can bring into this, and it's thinking and feeling with ourselves individually, but also in conjunction with our team members, and saying to ourselves that we're not going to become stagnant. We're not going to accept the status quo and that things are always going to be the way that they are because it's uncomfortable to be in a new place. We start to challenge ourselves and say, I wonder what would happen if. I wonder what's going on right now. And being open to receiving some new information and maybe something new happening. The second one is an open heart, which is really scary for a lot of people. I get that. You know, there's more discussion and talk around empathy as a term and use in organizations, and I think that's a really good start. I want to challenge people to go a step further into compassion. Compassion is deeper into the heart. So if you look at a scale, the bottom tier would be sympathy, which kind of feels really icky to receive from someone because it's like, oh, poor you. The next tier would be empathy, being able to understand and share the feelings of another person. And the deepest state is compassion, which is actually being able to be with and hold with somebody else in a state of understanding their feelings, but also being able to feel them with them fiercely without taking it on yourself. And that is a state where somebody else feels held, they feel safe, they feel heard. This is my superpower when I'm doing work in organizations. I know this. And it's my superpower because this is how I am able to help teams go through radical transformations very quickly. My work when I'm in organizations is to sit and talk and walk with people and help them to be heard safely about things that are bothering them in ways that they've never had happen before. Certainly at work, sometimes even with their family. And that's not for everybody. I totally respect that. So my invitation for you is, how can we bring more compassion in with your colleagues, with your customers, with your managers, and managers with your team members, with your product owners, you know, in all directions. And what you're diminishing on the other side is hate and anger and all sorts of really other, like really heavy feelings where you hear talk like, well, those people. We reduce language like that and say, no, it's not about those people and us. Like, you'll often hear, well, the leaders aren't doing what they need to do. Or the leaders are saying, well, the team members, man, they're just a mess. We're in different boxes. And we want to reduce those and open to a space of compassion. We want to create safety for each other collectively, to build care into all aspects of our system, to have respect and connection with each other, and to hold that respect and connection and understanding matter. And they're not negotiable, they're not optional. And to start with, use empathy. There are so many like wonderful ways to learn empathy. There's lots of courses available now, workshops, things like that. There's amazing books too. Just do a quick Google search. So an example of that is, we want to bring a state of wholeness at work. We want to feel whole when we're at work. Not that I have me at home, this is me at home, and then I have this persona of me at work, where I'm able to be a version of myself, but not my whole self. I want to feel that I can be all of myself everywhere I go, that I can be inherently very authentic and true to myself, and I can be very much in a state of congruence where how I feel and think inside of myself is what I am relating to other people outside of me, and then I'm able to receive that from other people. And this comes down to having connection with ourselves, connection with other people, having love, and knowing that there is abundance available for all of us. And what I mean by that is that it's possible for us to be able to achieve everything that we believe that we can do, and that we believe that we can achieve even more than what our fear tells us we can do. Does that make sense? Okay. So one practical step that you can take is to listen to people. Active listening is a term I'm sure many people have heard. Active listening means actually being very present. And being very present means that we're not thinking about what the person is saying. We are not thinking about what to reply to. We're not thinking about, well, that's wrong. We're not thinking about what I really need to get to this point. I'm not thinking about my meetings later. I'm not thinking about my grocery list. I'm actually being very, very present. Being actively listening in a state of presence is very different than the term active listening in our industry right now, I feel. Getting to a state of full presence means being able to feel deeply yourself and your body, so that you can be so present in the moment that there is nothing else available to you except for what the other person is saying. Some ways to help you to improve your listening skills is meditation. Meditation is a practice that helps you to quiet your mind and get really present with yourself and your body. There are so many different types of meditation available. Guided meditations are a really great way to start. I've been active with meditation for most of the last 10 years, I'd say. And for those who say, well, it doesn't work for me because my brain always turns back on. Well, mine does too. This is just how it is. You don't ever get to a state until, even the Dalai Lama has admitted to this, for anyone who references that. But the mind is always going to find a way to take over. The cue is getting into a state of just saying, oh, my mind is thinking again. Let's just divert away and just follow my breath and stop thinking. And if you can get to like 10 seconds of pure quiet presence without your mind thinking in the span of like meditating for 15 or 30 minutes even, you've done really well. So don't assume that because it hasn't worked for you that it won't help you in the future, that it won't work for you. It totally can and it will. It has for me. And my brain's like playing in 3 different things all at once all the time otherwise. So if I can do it, I'm sure that you can do it too. But outside of that, again, with active listening, just take yourself, even if you don't want to go into meditation, it's totally fine. But just cue into, what am I hearing the person saying? And just keep checking in with that. What are they saying? What are they saying? And just listen. You don't need to formulate a response. You just need to be there with them. And when it's time for you to speak, you can just be quiet until you know what to say. It's okay to be quiet. The third one is an open will. So for an open will, this means I have agency and choice available to me. I'm able to make choices for myself. And as a team, I am able to make choices with my team members. We can make choices for ourselves. We are not dictated to by someone else all of the things that we are supposed to do. What this means is increasing courage and reducing our fear. Stepping into courage to make a choice rather than not doing something because we're scared of what might happen. There's so much pressure for some people and organizations where they feel very, very scared to make any choices for themselves and say, like, for example, well, we're not allowed to do that. And say, well, what if we just did it? You know, as a coach, I would say, well, what if we just did it and I'll take care of it if there's a problem? And then I would work on helping them learn the skills to know how to take care of it themselves, right? To show them how to navigate hard conversations like that if they're coming up, but also to encourage them and help to build safety for them, right? And as a leader, it's the same thing. How do I step into courage to step outside of the norm? I've been in middle management in organizations, and I've often found myself being one of the middle managers who was painstakingly at times, but courageous to step into things that were different than how the organization operated because I knew it was the right thing. And I can't tell you how many times I risked my job to make harder choices, but actually ended up helping the team members and help the organization and help the projects. So with an open will, that means you have agency for yourself, you have choice, and you're not being dictated to by fear. And most organizations have elements of fear driving how they run. So one example of going a little further into this around stepping into courage is, and having an open will, is sensing into purpose. This is a very courageous thing because it means I'm not sticking to the plan where we have something to be able to predict and control everything that's going to happen. Because no matter what you think is going to happen, there's a myriad of other possible choices. And I guarantee you can't think of everything that could possibly happen. We want to step into a state of allowing things to emerge and adapt and evolve, and being able to pivot, again, like responding to change, pivot and adapt to things as new things come up. Yes, it's helpful to have a sense of what could happen and what are we going to do if this happens, but how much time do you really need to be putting into planning for all possible outcomes when you're supposed to be agile? The whole point of this is being able to allow things to emerge, make the best choices we can in the moment, allow things to emerge, adapt to those things that happen, and to evolve into the next thing. The sensing into purpose is about using our collective energy to sense the possibilities of what can happen and what does this project want to do now? What does the team want to do now? What does the organization want to do now? This is what is required for bold vision. It is what is required for bold creativity and bold innovation. And if we know where to look, which is outside of our plan, if we know to look outside of our plan and to be watching for patterns of things and things that feel new and different and unique, we can see the new emerging. Like what we can see happening right now in our collective with the pandemic and everyone's working from home. There are many people, before everyone got shifted into working from home in this industry, that could see this was coming, you know, and like last year even, this was a battle for organizations and conversation. It was a battle for them, not for me, but, you know, to have a conversation about having remote work and have this to be a little bit more normal and having work from home days for the people and teams. And everyone's saying, no, we can't do that. We can't trust them. We can't do that. We can't trust them. But a lot of people saw that this was coming. And some people were preparing for that. And now everyone's been forced into it, right? So can we see the new emerging that's outside of what we are familiar with, outside of what our plans are indicating, what we could think about in the moment to allow new things to come. And in order to do that, you have to be willing to let go, which is a really hard thing for people to do sometimes. I know that it has been for me. I've been undergoing a lot of different forced changes in my life for the last year and a half. And letting go of feeling like I have control over some of these things in my life has been really, really hard. And I know that's the same in our context of work too, for many, many people, because it's comfortable, it's familiar, and this is where we feel safe. So how do we sense into a new space that's outside of our known quantity when we feel safe here? One way to do that again is to get really, well, some people just leap. Okay, so that's one option. You can just leap. One way that I've helped myself to be comfortable with leaping outside of my comfort familiar, and to put it nicely for myself, I needed a lot of comfort familiar much of my life because of my environment growing up. So I needed to feel like I could have safety by knowing what was coming. That's why I was a very good project and program manager, because I could plan out all the different options. I knew how to look for danger. And having that sense of control over my environment and what was coming was very safe. But we are living in times, and this will progressively continue to be even more complex and more complicated, the way of projects. And now with people working from home, we're opening up to having many more people working in our offices virtually from all sorts of different backgrounds that you may never have had to work with before. You know, and that brings in a lot of new ideas and possibly a lot more innovation and a lot more like points of pivot. So how do you do that? So one way, again, like I said, was to just leap. One way that I trained my system, my nervous system, to be okay with big changes is to do obstacle races, which forced me to do some things that I was terrified of, like leaping off of like 20, 30-foot platforms, or crawling through live wires, or even just going for really long runs over dangerous terrain. You know, that was one way that I trained myself. But you can do simpler things too. One way is just sitting very still again and just noticing, how is my body responding to the moment, and just doing what's called a body scan. So going up from your toes, up to your feet, up your legs, all the way up your torso, and just tuning in. You can do this fast or slow. And just tune in and say, what is my body feeling right now? Where do I feel tight? Where do I feel pain? Where do I feel stress? Do I feel fluttering somewhere? And just notice that. Again, this is about getting really present with yourself and say, okay, there's something happening in my environments with the people I'm working with or with the project I'm working on, and oh, my body's kind of in a panic in this part. What does that mean? And you can even go so far as to ask and say, hey, arm, why are you feeling sore there? What's going on? All of your emotions get stored in your body. This is a very well-known thing now in the world. It's maybe not well known in our industry yet, but it's very well known in many areas of industry now. So being really present and then asking, like, okay, now I know that I'm really struggling with something. This is where it's stored. How can I let go of that? How can I support that? How can I nurture that? And if you can't tune into your body, like I have a couple of one-on-one clients that really struggle with this, and that's okay. And they work in the Agile industry, and they really struggle to tune into the body that way. That's okay. And like, okay, so let's work on another technique to help you to let go of your fear. Let's work on another technique to help you to let go of your hesitation or your worry. or whatever it happens to be, and just tuning into what is the right thing for me right now. Because what works for me may not work for you, and that's okay. And maybe you have other ways that help you let go. What it comes down to is this, all the things that I've been talking about, the inner choices that we make whenever we engage with another human being or with a system or with ourselves really matters. What we think internally matters. What we speak to ourselves and what we speak to other people matter. What we feel as we're thinking and speaking matters. How we communicate those things matter. If someone is very angry and speaking words that are in opposition to that anger, you feel the anger come through, right? If someone is really frustrated or fed up with somebody else and they're not saying anything, or maybe they're saying, no, it's totally fine, you feel that coming through, right? So we want to be clear within ourselves. We want to feel that clearly. And in terms of how we communicate with each other and how we interact with the system that we work in and how we work together as a cohesive unit, like that murmur of birds. And this all comes down to presence. How do we step out of the past as an informant into this present moment? Because even though we've been in similar situations with similar types of people, this present moment is unique and different. And how do we step out of the fear of the future and our anxiety about what could happen? And how do we get into this now state? That is the only way to access the magic of having an open mind, heart, and will. It's the only way to really tune into your compassion, your courage, your curiosity. It's the only way to thrive as a team. It's the only way to thrive on your project. It is the way to be innately, deeply curious and creative and innovative. And the true test is, how do we do this when times are really tough? And we're not always going to get it right. It's all about learning and growing as we go. You know, with everything that's happened the last few months globally, there are things coming up for me where I don't have these things down. I'm like, nope, I'm checking out. I need to watch Netflix. You know, or nope, I can't navigate a conversation with this person right now because I need to deal with my inner state first. You know, there's been a lot of stress in a lot of people, and that's okay. We're all learning as we go. And how can we step even a little bit further into that? And these are the things that are going to make the difference for you in your teams and projects and your organizations. So, how will you bring more soul? How will you bring more presence? How will you bring more care? How will you bring more of your true, authentic self into your everyday moments? So that's my talk. I'm happy to take questions or comments, whatever you have. And side note, it's really hot in my office because my air conditioning went off just before the talk started. And I cannot wait for a popsicle soon.
So if you do have a question, you should be able to unmute yourself. If you have any trouble with that, raise your hand or something and I can unmute you. Or type in chat.
Yeah, I'd love to hear people's voices. That'd be great. And if something that I said like really rubbed you the wrong way, like I'd love to hear that too.
I'll start with a question.
Sure.
It's Nancy here. You can hear me okay, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned in your talk that you encounter teams who really feel they have no choice, like being told what stories have to be done in the next sprint. Can you give us any examples of them trying a different tack with their managers based on the ideas that you've been presenting?
I can tell you what I've suggested with some of them. So in one case was in one example, I actually had a team together. They've been operating under a Scrum practice for a bit, and they were taking like an Agile class with me. And this is when they said, right, like we were told this is what we have to deliver. And I said, okay, well, that's wrong. Let's work this through, like understanding the context, of course. But what we landed on is something that they could do is to go back to their Scrum Master and say, okay, so we understand that these are like the wants and desires. Can you help us understand why we're operating in a waterfall practice with this project rather than Agile? Because we're operating under Agile things otherwise. So can we talk about that? So that's one thing, is to actually just bring to light that that is a waterfall practice. It doesn't matter if you have them under stories or not. It doesn't matter if you like go through all the sizing and all the other Agile things. Like if you're told this is what you're delivering, then you're operating under Agile. The other thing to look at, which I find really helpful, and this is not something that team members may feel comfortable with, but maybe you can engage their coach or Scrum Master or product owner collectively on, is to look at the values. What are the values of the organization? Compare them to the Agile values versus what waterfall values might actually be. And just bring to light, like, okay, so our values and how we operate and what we care about actually clash with an Agile way of working. So what can we do to bring that into coherence and congruence? In some organizations that I've done some Agile coaching in, we actually decided to backstep from some of the Agile ways of working because their values were so conflicting with the Agile nomenclature and practices that it was too much. It was a detriment to the team to keep them operating under an Agile name when they weren't actually Agile. So they reverted for a project back into this, using still stories and stuff. They still use some helpful benchmarks around iterations, but it was much more of a flow system at that point with a deadline rather than straight up waterfall, because they were already in the midst of it. So I feel myself that going to the values and comparing and contrasting is a really helpful way to go. And if you are not a coach or a Scrum Master or a manager that has any influence or feels, as a team member, maybe you do feel safe to have these conversations, and that's great. But if you don't, consider who might be an ally for you in the organization to start up those conversations with and get them engaged to work with you in the team. Your ally may or may not be your manager or your Scrum Master. There may be somebody else. And an ally would be somebody who does have some influence and sway with some other people. Because keeping yourself in that state is so not helpful. It does more harm than good.
Thank you. Yeah, that resonates with me, the idea of shifting it to talking about the principles and also looking for allies. Those are good topics. Thanks.
Selena, a lovely talk. I did want to ask a bit about compassion in a Zoom format. I mean, we're now very separate tiles. We call it the Brady Bunch view. And it's just so hard to make that connection. As good as video as we may have, but how do you feel? Is there a crisis coming because of this kind of disparate
I
connection?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. So I'm going to share personal experience first, and then I'll get into what I would suggest. Okay, because this really speaks personally to me. With all of the lockdowns that happened, I live by myself. So all of my contact for 2 months, I had a little bit of contact with people before, just as the pandemic started, because I helped a friend move, but then I went into lockdown in April. And all of my connection with people was virtual. It was through video calls and phone calls. And I found myself really struggling, really struggling. And it didn't matter how many times I was speaking to people a week. It could be 2 times a week or 15 times a week over video. The lack of human connection was really depressing. And the reason for that is because in order to really empathize and connect with someone, there are biological impulses that go back and forth between people that you can't get through a video screen or a call. You can get some through audio cues, and our systems respond to the audio things in some fashion, but there's a core state of our physiological being, our nature, for our health, for our mental health, our physical health, and our emotional health that cannot be met through video and phone calls.
Yeah.
Which means that people's empathy and compassion will start disconnecting more if they're not in contact with humans. So what do we do about that? We have to find a way to have time with humans in some capacity. If, like for me, it's like I have neighbors that I can talk to over the fence. Now I can be out in the world a bit more now here in Canada, but I'm still really careful because I have a compromised immune system. And then it's at that point, like weighing the balance of like, how much do I spend time with people at a distance? When do I cross that border to have a hug? Because I hadn't had a hug in 2.5 months, you know, which was really hard. So I just, with people that I trust, I'm like, okay, I'm just hugging and I'm not letting go, you know, until they're uncomfortable. But, you know, these things are required for us. So if you live with people, maybe you need to talk with them more so that you can relate to another human in a helpful way, right? And actually have meaningful conversations and connection. Now, outside of like, who can you interact with around you in daily life, how do we bridge the compassion back for people where we're only on video calls or chat windows or emails with, right? So it goes back to some of the things that we're taught with an agile way of working with remote teams is, as much as possible, get it to video, right? Get it to video. Stop with the email and chat windows, the Slack channels as the primary means. Use them as supports, but not as your primary communication. Where you can. And it's also more challenging too in a way because now everyone's like booking meetings with everybody all the time in order to have a conversation that they can just like have through a hallway chat before. So it's a little bit different too, right? So what I do, like when I have clients where I'm talking to over Zoom, you know, it's a check-in about how are they really doing? What's going on for you right now? And don't focus on work right away. Like if you're in daily connection with somebody or a couple times a week where you know where they're at and what's going on, that's fine. Maybe you don't need to do it every time you talk to them, but asking them like real questions to really know what's going on for them and how they are. So with one of my clients, I'm like, okay, what's going on for you today? How do you feel? Okay, how does your body feel? How are you dealing with self-care? These things are things that indicate I care about you and I care what's going on for you. What's bothering you today? And looking at that stuff before we get to what we really need to focus on. And like asking questions like that indicate care of the other person is the best bet, given that you're stuck in video rooms.
right? And you can't ignore that stuff. These are the same things that I did when I was in an office coaching teams. These are the same questions that rarely got asked by their colleagues with other people. This is why people opened up to me so fast. You know, it might take a couple of times. In one case, it was a manager that was really angry that I was even there because he wasn't the problem. He didn't really yell at people. But it was my just showing up and checking in with him every day and just saying, hey, how are you doing? How's your day? How's your daughter doing? And not even talking about work stuff. I wouldn't get to that until he was more open with me.
Mhm.
You know, and that's, you've got to build a rapport and the care. And you can only build the care if people feel cared about. Yeah.
So if I could add two, I'm sorry, did you have more, Tim?
No. I just said thanks.
Okay.
That help?
I didn't want to interrupt. Yeah, so two related comments. One of them is this sort of came up in chat talking about empathy versus compassion, because they're really two separate things and live independently. Empathy is about understanding what somebody else is feeling and what they're going through, and compassion is caring about it. And you can have one without the other. It's great to have both. Another thing I wanted to comment on is the kind of checking in that you're talking about, in part to develop that emotional and social bond with people. One of the things that we talk about in the Agile New England board internally a lot is the core protocols, because one of our board members is involved in one of the groups driving that concept. And they have the concept of check-ins where you're kind of doing that both, because you care about that person, but also it helps build trust when you know not everybody's on their game 100% of the time. And when at this point, you're solid as a rock at this point, you're off your game, and, we should know not to count on you for certain things. And it can help develop that trust when how responsive that person's going to be at that time.
Yeah.
And just be open about it and transparent about it. Going through some stuff at home, I'm going to be a little, distant today, and then everybody can just kind of go with that instead of relying on them and getting mad when they're not responding to emails or something like that.
Yeah, it really makes a big difference. I've done that when, like, I've led retreats, and if I was having a hard time, like I led one in Guatemala last year, and I literally had broken my foot the week before, and it was too late to cancel. I had to go. And, by day 5, I was just depleted, completely depleted. And I started the day speaking to, I'm having a really hard day, like, and this is where I'm at. And we took 10 minutes. And the attendees really, really, really appreciated my honesty. Like, most people would just hide it and power through, and that just speaks volumes. I really believe in modeling this behavior, and it gives other people permission to share of themselves too. And that's how we relate to each other as humans in a healthy way. Thank you for that. Other questions or comments? Everything was good then, otherwise.
David, I have a comment question. I feel like in the open heart area, that's an area that at times I struggle with. I feel like I have empathy, but I can also get upset. Do you have any tips or suggestions, perhaps on letting go of the anger and getting upset when things don't go right, or there's disturbances, and embracing the empathy and the compassion?
An example of when things don't go right, please.
Well, sure. So one of them that still bothers me today, we were having a meeting, and somebody pulls out their computer and starts typing away and reading their email. And I got very upset. Either be present or don't be present.
Right.
and I didn't feel like I handled it well. And so that's always bothered me. How do I find that balance? So even when something's not right, I'm still compassionate. I'm still empathetic.
Right. Okay. I want to address that with two things, if that's okay. So first, try to let go of that things are right or wrong. It's not about there's right and there's wrong. There's this feels not good for me, but it might be perfectly fine for them, right? And so we stop seeing things as black and white, basically. My son is high functioning autistic. He's very, very literal, very, very black and white. It's been a very hard challenge to help him to see that there's shades of gray. Boy, he's been a good teacher for me too. So trying to let go of that and just taking a breath and pausing and just saying, okay, just breathe. And I find just a slow, deep breath, and maybe 3 and maybe 4 is what I need to do in a moment. So just calm my nervous system down. And there's actually a trick you can do that people won't notice. If you inhale slowly to a count of 4 and exhale longer than a count of 4, like you can do it to a 4 count, which is fine. But if you exhale longer than your inhale, it actually compresses your vagus nerve in your body, which helps to calm your nervous system, which helps to calm the frustration and the anger. So that's a little tip or trick that you can do in the moment. That's really helpful. Otherwise, it's going into a state of curiosity. You know, if you're someone who accesses your mind easier than your heart, and saying, well, my mind is available, so let's go to curiosity. I wonder what's going on for that person right now. So I might just check in and say, hey, is everything okay? Are you able to come back and be fully present with us? We would really love your attention and your contribution. And seeing where that goes, right? After you ask and check in and say, are things okay for you? You know, is there something that needs your attention right now where you can't be present with us? You know, do you want to duck out of the room so you can go handle that and then come back and be present with us? That way, you're giving them space. You're in a space of possible compassion, at least curiosity about what they need to do for themselves. And you're being clear about you would love for them to be present and contribute, right? This is a trick that I've used in like live meeting rooms too with people and saying, hey, is everything okay over there? Can you bring it back here? So maybe we can finish this meeting a lot faster and everyone can get your, unique thoughts and your brilliance. You know, and it's not about manipulating people. It's just saying, like, we want you here. We value your contributions. Please come back to us. And if you can't, we respect that you need to leave. You know, and that way you're setting some boundaries too. Right?
Sort of like that, the curiosity. I think
Yeah, you're getting clear about your desire and what's fitting or not, right?
Yeah, the curiosity would have worked good in that situation because he was under stress from his manager.
Sure. So, but the first step is always tuning into yourself, right? You got to take care of yourself first and getting yourself a bit more into balance, into centeredness. I don't always get it right either, and that's okay. We're all learning.
That's your superpower.
Well, if I'm in coach mode, it's different than when I'm dealing with struggles with my kid. You know? Or family. Yes. I see Marcel has a hand up.
Marcel, yeah. Actually, I think that's very helpful because I think with COVID-19, people are under very different kinds of stresses and it's showing up in different ways.
Yeah.
Sometimes anger, sometimes frustration with other people. And what you're suggesting, I think is very helpful to be able to step back, to get into a calm place and then, or a curious place. Yeah. And to be able to be with that person as they move through whatever the peak is from the COVID-19.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and I'm going to say again, like, you have to take care of yourself first, right? my natural state is compassion and empathy for others. Like from a very small child, that's how I was. And that meant over time that I was putting other people ahead of myself most of the time and not taking care of my emotional state, or it wasn't coming out at them. I was internalizing it and putting it at, like, attacking myself somehow. And these things actually affect our physical health. So I've had to go deep into other areas of study to try to like sort out my health that the doctors can't answer. And this is why I know what I know now. So you have to come back and take care of you first. And if you're feeling pretty grounded and centered, then you can go out and tune in with people in that way, in a helpful way, where it's not compromising you along the way. You can't have compassion in action without that. Yeah.
Hi, this is Jessica. I have I think two questions. It's like twofold. I'll start with this open will concept that you brought into, right? Like stepping into courage and moving away from fear.
Mm-hmm.
So I in like past week or so, I saw two different extreme situations. Like there was like this huge planning meeting going on with 250 people online, and someone at the development team level had a courage to come in and say, we are not confident enough about this planning in front of these many people and the management, right? And then in one of the team's retro, what happened is someone kind of brought up very courageously a situation wherein there was a lot of directional action, through the managers versus teams being self-organized. And in the sprint after, in the retrospective, no one actually showed up, right? So it's like two extreme situations here. And my second part of the question is related to the empathy part. And
go back to the first part.
Yeah.
Do you have a specific question from the first part?
Yeah. So how do we kind of articulate as to how to approach this, right? Like I would want to take that one example of courage and kind of bring it to this team and coach them. But at the same time, I don't know if I could use that example, and that would create conflict between these two people, right? I don't want to use that. So what would be the approach to kind of help them realize that our culture is very much inclusive for everyone, but then how do I support each other without throwing out examples or comparing people?
Right. What I do is pull examples from real life outside of work. I have used a lot of examples from my relationship with my son, because they mimic very well things happening in organizations. And he doesn't know necessarily what I talk about, but it's also like things in my personal life with, friends or family members, anything that you can pull that you've experienced that seems to like overlay nicely on troubling situations that are happening in the organization. Use those, because you can pull not just your experience, but the feelings involved and the outcomes that happened or didn't happen. And that's the most helpful way. It's relating as a human, that I've been through something similar and this is how it went. Pulling examples that didn't go well versus the ones that did go well. It's great to use one and another experience like that. So sometimes in talks I give, I talk about an organization that I worked in where we went through a beautiful agile transformation about 11 or 12 years ago. And then I left the organization because they decided to throw it out the window and go back to command and control. And they use those words, command and control. So I talk about specific examples along that path back to that as a failure, but also talk about ones where things went really well. Like a team that was literally on death row. I was brought in to help them like succeed because they were ready to fire people. And they had someone in to decide who to fire at the same time they brought me in. That was not great. And I had to talk to the management team about that. But we went through a massive positive transformation. And so, you know, you can use specific examples and even past work experiences to help you with that too, right? So it depends on what feels right for the audience that you're speaking with, whether you pull from personal life or work life, that these people don't have any interaction with, and speak to other people's hearts and speak to their minds.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes, it does.
Do you think it's some examples that might be appropriate?
So yeah, one thing I'm thinking is it could be probably I could give my example. Like I have faced similar situations myself when I was a team member, and I could kind of walk that person through my journey. And so it's not something that I'm pointing out to a person that he or she already knows and might not help their relationship, right? So instead of that, I could pull a different example, but still on the same lines. Okay. Yeah. So if I could ask a follow-up question.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's related to empathy and kind of falling into this empathy trap, right? Which I think I see myself a lot kind of losing sleep over trying to help people or try to solve some of these problems. And I think especially since I learned more about Agile and being a Scrum Master, I really want to help not just my teams, but other Scrum Masters, other teams. And I kind of like, I think I kind of start ignoring somewhat my family, my personal health at some point to just get into solving these things. But I feel like that's not always the right thing to do. There are better ways to handle this. And for instance, the prior question that I had is something that's on my mind because some other Scrum Master had this situation, and I'm trying to help her out to kind of figure that out. And so I'm bringing that question here. But how do I save myself from an empathy trap?
Well, it's back to how do you take care of yourself first? I've had to learn this the hard way. I'm a giver and peacekeeper and nurturer. That's just my state of being. And I've had to, and I say learn the hard way, to like pull back into myself and learn how do I take care of myself just for me, not so I can take care of other people. So I can really take care of myself for me. And then I have lots to give to other people to a limit, because I am not a battery that is ever going, you know? So learning how to have boundaries for yourself around the time that you invest, but also learning how to like interact with people to pull out of them options and choices, and then asking, and what are you going to do now? Which one are you going to take? And leaving it to them and say, okay, I'd love to hear about how that goes for you. Check in with me. And you check in with them, you know, and it's this practice of you keep checking in. And if they're not following through, then the question is, so do you want this to be different? You know, you can have empathy and connect, but it comes down to not taking responsibility for other people's choices and other people's problems, right? You can connect and have empathy and compassion without taking it on yourself. And I, like, honestly, for those who are just naturally like super compassionate and want to help everyone, it will really affect your health, physically, but mentally, all the ways. It really will. And you will have to deal with that one day if you don't address it before it's too late. So I've had to take a lot of time off from working at different points in my career to address health problems that doctors couldn't diagnose, that I know are a result of over-giving and over-showing up and over-helping people. I am not responsible for anybody else. You are not responsible for anyone else. You are responsible for yourself. And when you feel clear and good and you're taking good care of yourself, then you have so much more to give to support others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Hey, folks, I think that's probably a good note to wrap up about. We've gone a little longer than planned with the questions, but hey, we don't have to finish the use of a building tonight. How about if we give Selena a big thanks, and you can applaud with your reaction button if you'd like.